My name is Valerie. I am 33 years old, and before my sister's wedding, my parents summoned me to a dinner to hand me a list of 5 humiliating conditions I had to meet just to receive an invitation. Do all of them, my mother said, and we will let you hide in the back. I just smiled, booked a one-way ticket to a beach vacation in Malibu, and mailed one final unforgettable gift. As my sister opened it in front of hundreds of high society guests, she screamed in absolute terror. Before I tell you how I tore down their house of cards, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever had to deal with a toxic family that underestimated you. The steakhouse in downtown Chicago was the kind of place that smelled of roasted bone marrow, aged leather, and old money. It was exactly the kind of place my parents William and Catherine loved to use to show off. I sat across from them and my sister Victoria, who was clinging to the arm of her fiance, Marcus. Marcus was a man who loudly claimed to be the heir to a massive real estate empire in Atlanta. My mother reached into her designer handbag and slid a crisp, cream-colored envelope across the white tablecloth toward me. She tapped her manicured fingernail against the paper. "Open it," she commanded. "We have discussed this with Marcus and his family. If you want to attend the wedding, you need to agree to our terms." I picked up the envelope, opened the wax seal, and pulled out a single sheet of typed paper. It was titled, "5 Conditions for Wedding Attendance." I kept my face completely blank as I read the list aloud to the table. Condition 1. I must dye my hair back to a dull, mousy brown and wear a generic gray catering uniform so I do not outshine the bridesmaids or embarrass the aesthetic of the event. Condition 2. I am forbidden from sitting at the family tables. I will be seated in the vendor tent out of sight during the reception. Condition 3. If anyone from Marcus's elite Atlanta family speaks to me, I must introduce myself as a former assistant to the family, absolutely not as Victoria's biological older sister. Condition 4. I must write a check for $20,000 to their honeymoon fund. The paper specifically stated this was to repay the debt I owed my parents for being such a difficult and rebellious child. Condition 5. I am strictly prohibited from bringing a date. Victoria had added a handwritten note next to this one stating that my low-class boyfriends would ruin her carefully curated photos. I set the paper down next to my glass of tap water. The sheer audacity of the list was almost impressive. I looked at my parents. My father William was aggressively cutting his Wagyu steak. He pointed his knife at me. "Marcus comes from the absolute elite of Atlanta," my father sneered. "Your freelance computer typing job is an embarrassment to this family. We cannot have his relatives thinking we associate with failure. Victoria carries the legacy of this family now. You dropped out of college, Valerie. You have to know your place." I looked at my father. He loved to bring up my college dropout status. He conveniently left out the reason why I dropped out. 10 years ago, my parents drained my college savings account because Victoria threw a massive tantrum about wanting a nose job and needing to attend a prestigious private art school. I left college because I gave up my future to pay for her vanity. But I did not say a word about that now. Complaining was for victims. Marcus took a slow sip of his $800 Cabernet. He leaned back in his chair and smirked at me with utter arrogance. "Sign the paper, Val. My uncle owns half of the commercial real estate in downtown Atlanta. If you behave and follow these rules, I will pull some strings and get you a job scrubbing the lobby at one of our lower-end apartment complexes. It pays better than whatever typing you do on the internet." Victoria giggled and kissed his cheek. "You are so generous, babe," she said. She looked at me with a condescending pout. "See, Valerie, we are just trying to help you fit into our new lifestyle. Just sign the contract and bring the check." They all sat there waiting for me to break down. They expected me to cry, to beg for their approval, or to storm out in a fit of emotional rage. That was the dynamic we had played out for years. They would push me down and I would desperately try to climb back up. But I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I started to laugh. It was a cold, genuine laugh that echoed over the quiet jazz playing in the restaurant. I picked up the cream-colored contract, tore it straight down the middle, and dropped the pieces directly into Marcus's expensive wine glass. The wine splashed onto the crisp, white tablecloth. "What is wrong with you?" my mother shrieked, dropping her fork. I ignored her and raised my hand to flag down the restaurant manager. The manager, a strict man who usually ignored anyone not wearing a bespoke suit, rushed over to our table immediately. He bowed his head slightly. "Is everything all right, Ms. Valerie?" he asked respectfully. "I am leaving," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm. "Please process my drink." I reached into my purse and pulled out a solid black American Express Centurion card. The heavy titanium clinked against the wooden table. My father stared at the card. He worked in finance and knew exactly what an invite-only black card meant. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The manager swiped my card on his portable machine to pay for my single glass of tap water. I stood up and smoothed out my dress. I looked down at my parents and my sister. "I am not paying for your dinner," I told them. "Enjoy the $6,000 bill." I turned to walk away but paused and looked back at Marcus. His face was red with anger, staring at the ruined contract floating in his wine. "By the way," I said, my voice cutting through the silence of the room, "that Patek Philippe watch you are wearing. It is a super fake from a sweatshop in Guangzhou. The sweeping hand stutters every 4 seconds. Real money does not tick, Marcus." I turned my back on them and walked out of the restaurant, leaving the entire table frozen in absolute horror. My phone vibrated violently against the marble nightstand of my hotel suite. The screen illuminated the darkened room with a relentless stream of notifications. The family group chat, ironically named Adam's Family Love, was an absolute war zone. My mother, Catherine, had sent 42 consecutive messages since I walked out of the steakhouse. When texting failed to elicit a response, she resorted to leaving furious voicemails. I tapped the screen and put the phone on speaker while packing my overnight bag. "Valerie, how dare you humiliate Marcus like that?" Catherine shrieked through the speaker, her voice shrill and trembling with rage. "You are a bitter, jealous spinster. You think you can walk away from your family and leave us with a $6,000 bill? Your father is furious and Victoria has been crying all night. Since you want to act like a spoiled child, we are going to treat you like one. I am calling the bank this morning to cancel that joint credit card we set up for you in college. Let us see how your freelance typing pays the rent when you have zero credit history." I listened to her unhinged rant with a calm smile. That joint credit card had a $500 limit. I had not used it in 11 years, keeping it active solely because I knew it gave them a false sense of control over my life. They truly believed I was a struggling typist scraping by in a dingy apartment. They had no idea I was the founder and CEO of Aegis, one of the most ruthless and elite crisis management and forensic accounting firms in New York. My clients were billionaires, politicians, and massive corporations. I did not type documents. I erased digital footprints, hunted down embezzled funds, and destroyed corporate spies. I picked up my phone and typed a single response into the chaotic group chat, ignoring the flood of incoming text messages from relatives who had no business involving themselves in my life. "Flight lands at 5 p.m. I am going to Malibu." I hit send, muted the conversation entirely, and headed for the door without looking back. An hour later, I was sitting in the leather seat of a private first-class cabin sipping sparkling water as the plane soared toward the west coast. The flight attendants addressed me by name, offering warm towels and quiet respect. It was a stark contrast to the blatant disrespect I had endured the night before. I spent the flight reviewing encrypted dossiers for my high-net-worth clients, completely unfazed by the familial bridge I had just burned. When the private car pulled up to my property in Malibu, the heavy steel security gates parted automatically. My home was a $15 million modern architectural masterpiece, perched directly on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered an unobstructed view of the crashing waves below. It was a fortress of solitude and success, paid for in cash with money I had earned tracking down white-collar criminals. I bypassed the massive living area and walked straight out to the teakwood balcony. The salty ocean breeze was the perfect antidote to the suffocating arrogance of Chicago. I walked over to the outdoor bar, poured myself a neat glass of aged Japanese whiskey, and took a slow sip. The silence was golden, but it was incredibly short-lived. A harsh repeating alarm suddenly blared from the encrypted tablet sitting on my patio table. The screen flashed bright red, displaying a critical security warning. A Level 1 breach protocol. I set down my glass and tapped the biometric scanner to unlock the device. Before I could even read the full diagnostic report, my encrypted business line rang. It was Hayes, my lead forensic analyst and head of cybersecurity at Aegis. "Boss, we have a major situation," Hayes said, his voice clipped and professional. "Someone just tried to run your social security number to open a massive line of credit." I narrowed my eyes, staring at the digital readout on my screen. "How much?" I asked. $150,000, Hayes replied. The loan application was submitted to a boutique lending firm that specializes in high-risk event financing. I pulled up the application details on my tablet. The sheer audacity of the request was staggering. The purpose of the loan was listed as wedding catering, imported floral arrangements, and venue deposits. My blood ran cold, not out of fear, but out of absolute disgust. Victoria and Marcus were apparently bleeding my parents dry, and instead of telling their precious golden child to scale back her ridiculous wedding, my parents had decided to commit federal identity theft. "Trace the IP address of the device that submitted the application," I commanded. "I need to know exactly where this came from." "I am already on it," Hayes said. The rapid clicking of his keyboard echoed through the secure line. "Got it. The IP address is registered to a residential network in the Chicago suburbs. It matches the physical address of William and Catherine Adams." I let out a harsh breath. My own parents. Less than 12 hours after threatening to cut off a $500 college credit card to teach me a lesson, they were actively stealing my identity to fund a $150,000 party for the daughter who mattered. They were perfectly willing to destroy my financial future, my credit, and my name just so Marcus and Victoria could have imported orchids and champagne towers. It was the ultimate betrayal, executed with the casual entitlement of people who believed I existed solely to absorb their burdens. "They actually did it," I murmured, staring at the crashing waves below my balcony. "They crossed the line from toxic parenting into felony fraud." Hayes cleared his throat. "The lending firm's automated system has flagged the application for manual review because of the security locks we placed on your profile. The funds are pending authorization. Should I block the transaction and alert the FBI? We have their IP address device, MAC address, and digital signatures. We can have federal agents at their door before dinner." I looked at the red warning screen on my tablet. I thought about the way my father had sneered at my career, the way my mother had demanded $20,000 as a penalty for my existence, and the way Marcus had offered me a job scrubbing lobby floors. Sending the FBI to their house right now would be too quick. It would be a shock, but it would not be a lesson. They needed to feel the absolute weight of their own arrogance. They needed to build their perfect wedding on a foundation of sand just so they could feel the impact when the ground swallowed them whole. I took another slow sip of my whiskey, feeling the smooth liquid burn as it settled in my chest, fueling the fire of my strategy. "No," I told Hayes, my voice dropping into a lethal, calculated register. "Do not block it. I want you to bypass our security locks and authorize the loan immediately." Hayes hesitated for a split second, surprised by the order. "Authorize it, boss. That is $150,000 legally tied to your name." "It will not be under my name for long," I said, staring at the endless horizon. "Route the approval through our dummy offshore trust in the Cayman Islands. Let the boutique lending firm approve the requested funds, but make sure you bind the collateral explicitly to the originating IP address and the physical real estate assets of the primary applicant. Let my parents think they got away with it. Let them spend the stolen money on their lavish flowers, the open bar, and the overpriced catering. I want to see exactly how deep of a grave they are digging for themselves." My encrypted phone buzzed on the glass table before the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. The caller ID flashed my sister's name. I let it ring 3 times before sliding my finger across the screen. Instantly, a loud theatrical sob burst through the speaker. Victoria was crying. Or rather, she was putting on the performance of a lifetime. Valerie, you have to help me, she wailed, her voice pitching up an octave in artificial distress. It is an absolute disaster, and I do not know what to do. I took another sip of my whiskey, entirely unmoved by her dramatic display. What seems to be the problem, Victoria? I kept my tone perfectly flat, giving her nothing to work with emotionally. She sniffled loudly, directly into the microphone. It is Marcus. His trust fund has been temporarily locked by international auditors. It is just a routine compliance check for high net worth accounts, obviously. But the wedding planner is threatening to cancel the venue if we do not submit the remaining $50,000 by tomorrow morning. I need you to wire me the money immediately. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the crashing waves. The audacity of her demand was laughable. Less than 24 hours ago, she had handed me a contract demanding I sit in a vendor tent and pretend to be her assistant. Now she wanted my money to save her wedding. That sounds incredibly stressful, I said smoothly. But if Marcus comes from such elite Atlanta real estate money, surely his family can wire the funds from a different corporate account to cover the gap. What exactly is the name of his family holding company again? Victoria huffed, her fake tears vanishing instantly as her trademark arrogance returned. You would not know them. They do not deal with small-time internet workers like you. They manage elite commercial properties across the entire East Coast. I pulled my tablet closer, opening a secure messaging channel to Hayes. Just humor me, Victoria. If I'm going to wire $50,000, I need to know where the funds are ultimately going. What are the exact names of his corporate holdings? She sighed heavily, clearly annoyed that I was making her work for the cash. Fine. It is Vanguard Elite Properties, Peachtree Crown Holdings, and the Sovereign Atlanta Group. I typed the names into the secure channel and hit send. My team was already waiting on standby. Yes, I am completely satisfied, I replied. Before Victoria could demand the money again, the line clicked. My mother had been listening in on a merged call the entire time. Valerie, stop interrogating your sister. Catherine snapped, her voice dripping with venom. Your sister is under extreme stress right now. If you were not such a bitter, jealous spinster, you would help your family without asking all these ridiculous questions. You are just trying to find a reason to ruin her happiness because you have none of your own. I watched the waves below my balcony. I am simply asking basic financial questions, Mother. Catherine scoffed loudly. You do not know the first thing about real wealth. Marcus is dealing with international tax laws that you could not possibly comprehend. In fact, he is buying Victoria a custom yacht for their 1-month anniversary. He just needs a tiny bridge loan to cover this inconvenience. Now, are you going to send the money, or are you going to continue being a massive disappointment to this family? I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. I simply tapped the red button on my screen and disconnected the call. The silence that followed was absolute bliss. Inside my Malibu command center, the atmosphere was electric. The large room was lined with floor-to-ceiling monitors displaying complex financial webs, property registries, and offshore banking nodes. My team of forensic accountants and cybersecurity experts had already intercepted the names Victoria gave me. I walked inside and stood behind Hayes. His fingers were flying across his dual keyboards. I want a full sweep of Vanguard Elite Properties, Peachtree Crown Holdings, and the Sovereign Atlanta Group. I commanded the room. Cross-reference every limited liability company, shell corporation, and tax record registered in the state of Georgia. Dig deep into their corporate officers, their registered agents, and their historical tax filings. Do not leave a single stone unturned. I want to know exactly who we are dealing with. The team worked relentlessly through the night. Empty coffee cups piled up on the desks as the hours ticked by. I paced the floor of the command center, reviewing the data streams as they trickled in. We pulled state tax records, property deeds, and corporate filings. We ran facial recognition software against Marcus's social media profiles and cross-referenced his supposed business associates. Every time we tried to find a concrete piece of evidence proving his wealth, we hit a dead end. The digital trail was deliberately convoluted, designed to look impressive to an untrained eye but completely hollow. The clock on the wall struck 3 in the morning. The only sounds in the room were the hum of the powerful servers and the rapid clicking of keyboards. I was standing by the glass window watching the moonlight reflect off the black ocean when the heavy door to the command center slid open. My lead investigator, a brilliant former federal agent named Sarah, walked in. She was holding a single file folder. Her expression was completely grim. I turned around to face her, sensing the gravity in her posture. "Talk to me," I said. Sarah walked over to the main conference table and tossed the folder down. The paper slapped against the glass surface. "Valerie, we scanned every property registry in Atlanta. We pulled the corporate filings for Vanguard Elite Properties, Peachtree Crown Holdings, and the Sovereign Atlanta Group." I looked at the closed folder, and Sarah looked me dead in the eye. "Marcus's family does not own a single building in Atlanta. Those holding companies were registered exactly 4 months ago, just weeks before he proposed to your sister. They have zero assets, zero tax history, and zero business operations." I stepped closer to the table, my mind racing. "What about his personal accounts?" Sarah shook her head slowly. "That is the worst part. We ran his biometric data through the federal database to confirm his identity. His real name is not even Marcus. He has absolutely no ties to any elite family in the country. He is a complete ghost." I stared at Sarah, the cool ocean breeze from the open balcony, suddenly feeling completely non-existent. "He is a ghost." I repeated the words, hanging heavy in the command center. A phantom who had effortlessly manipulated his way into the center of my status-obsessed family. I leaned over the glass conference table, my mind rapidly shifting from shock to pure, calculated strategy. "Ghosts do not exist in the digital age," I told my team, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "Every single person leaves a digital footprint. If he is hiding his true identity, it means he has something massive to lose." I turned to my lead cybersecurity analyst. "I want a deep dive facial recognition sweep using non-standard databases. Run his image through international transit logs, casino blacklists, and civil litigation records across all 50 states. Bypass the standard search protocols and access the restricted financial registries. Tear his fabricated life apart until we find the real man hiding underneath that cheap suit." My team nodded in unison, their fingers instantly flying across their keyboards to initiate the aggressive new sweep. The massive screens on the wall flickered as lines of code and search parameters began processing billions of data points. Before the servers could even finish crunching the initial biometric scans, the secure business line on my primary console chimed. The LED indicator flashed a bright, solid green, signaling a priority referral from Sterling and Vance, one of the most ruthless corporate litigation law firms in Chicago. I tapped the encrypted screen to accept the incoming video link. The monitor flickered to life, revealing a woman sitting behind a massive marble desk. She exuded absolute power and control. She wore a perfectly tailored crimson blazer, her posture rigid, her expression forged in pure steel. This was Dominique, the founder and CEO of a rapidly expanding biotech startup in Chicago. I knew her name and I knew her company's reputation. She was a brilliant self-made millionaire who commanded respect in every boardroom she entered. Right now, however, her dark eyes burned with a cold, controlled fury. "Ms. Valerie," Dominique said, her voice sharp and direct, completely devoid of pleasantries. "My legal team assured me that Aegis is the only firm capable of handling a highly sensitive, strictly confidential crisis of this magnitude. They tell me you hunt down financial predators and you do not ask unnecessary questions." I leaned back in my chair, matching her unwavering directness. "We specialize in extreme asset recovery and crisis management for high-net-worth individuals," I replied. "Tell me exactly what has been taken from you, Dominique, and we will find it." Dominique did not flinch. She did not offer a tearful monologue about broken trust or shattered dreams. She operated purely on facts, treating the betrayal as a corporate breach. "7 months ago, a man integrated himself into my life," she explained, her tone completely clinical. "He posed as a venture capitalist looking to invest heavily in my startup. He was charming, meticulously researched, and entirely fabricated. He isolated me from my financial advisors and manipulated me into a fraudulent marriage to gain legal proximity to my assets. She paused, her jaw tightening just a fraction before she continued. 3 weeks ago, he bypassed our internal security protocols. He completely drained $2 million from my primary corporate accounts and vanished without a single trace. The local authorities are moving too slowly, bogged down by jurisdictional red tape. I need your firm to locate him and retrieve my capital before he disappears overseas. I want him ruined. I watched Dominique on the screen. She was a fiercely intelligent, wealthy African American woman who had been specifically targeted by a highly sophisticated predator. This was not a simple romance scam. This was a professional heist executed by someone who knew exactly how to exploit the vulnerabilities of successful people. I am sending you the encrypted dossier now. Dominique continued typing rapidly on her end of the connection. It contains every scrap of data I have on him. It includes false identification records, the dummy accounts he used to siphon the funds, and the only photographic evidence he failed to wipe from my personal servers before he fled. A secure notification pinged on my console. The file labeled Client Transfer Alpha finished downloading into our isolated network. I clicked the decryption key and opened the attachment on my secondary vertical monitor. Given the nature of the crime, I expected to see a blurry surveillance photo, a scanned copy of a fake passport, or a generic headshot. Instead, the screen lit up with a high-resolution, professionally shot wedding photograph. In the center of the image stood Dominique, looking breathtaking in a custom white gown, smiling radiantly at the camera with genuine happiness. Standing right next to her, wearing a bespoke tuxedo and a familiar, arrogant smirk, was the groom. I stopped breathing. The air in the Malibu command center seemed to instantly evaporate. I stared at the man in the photograph, my eyes locking onto his face, my brain refusing to process the reality of the image. It was the exact same face that had sat across from me at the Chicago steakhouse just 12 hours ago. It was the same man who had confidently ordered an $800 bottle of wine and mocked my freelance typing job. It was the same man who was currently engaged to my vain, oblivious sister. Marcus was not just a ghost. He was an active, seasoned con artist, and he was currently legally married to the woman sitting on my video screen. He had drained Dominique of $2 million and immediately moved on to his next targets, William and Catherine Adams. My parents were proudly mortgaging their entire existence to a man who had already perfected the art of absolute financial ruin. I looked back at the live video feed. Dominique was watching me, waiting for a professional assessment. She wanted to know if Aegis could find the phantom who had stolen her money and her dignity. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. The final pieces of the puzzle slammed together, forming a weapon more devastating than anything I could have planned myself. "Ms. Dominique," I said, my voice dripping with lethal elegance, "not only do I know exactly where your husband is, but I also know his tuxedo size for this coming Sunday." Dominique does not gasp. She does not act shocked. Instead, she leans forward, her dark eyes locking onto the camera with the predatory focus of a seasoned CEO. "You have my full attention, Valerie. Tell me everything." I tap my keyboard, instantly mirroring my primary display directly to Dominique's secure server. I bring up the surveillance photos my operatives snapped outside the steakhouse just hours ago. The screen splits, showing the wedding photo Dominique provided right next to a candid shot of Marcus kissing Victoria's cheek. His current alias is Marcus, I explain, my voice entirely devoid of emotion. He is currently engaged to my younger sister, Victoria. They are scheduled to be married in a lavish, highly publicized ceremony in Newport, Rhode Island, this coming Sunday. Dominique lets out a sharp, humorless laugh. A wedding. Of course. That is his signature move. He creates a fairy tale to blind the entire family before he robs them blind. Over the next 2 hours, Dominique and I transform my Malibu command center into a war room. We merge her corporate data with my firm's forensic tracking software. Piece by piece, we map out the predator's playbook. Marcus is not a random thief. He is a highly calculated psychological manipulator. Dominique explains exactly how he operates. and I watch the pattern perfectly align with everything my family has been doing for the past 6 months. Marcus never targets actual billionaires. True generational wealth is protected by armies of lawyers, trust administrators, and ironclad background checks. Instead, Marcus hunts the upper middle class. He searches for families who are comfortable but desperately greedy families obsessed with climbing the social ladder and projecting an image of extreme wealth, families exactly like mine. He always finds a golden child. Dominique says, her voice cold and analytical. Someone vain, entitled, and easily manipulated by expensive gifts and flattery. He isolates them first, convincing them they deserve a life of absolute luxury. I nod, pulling up Victoria's incredibly obnoxious social media feeds filled with photos of Marcus taking her on chartered helicopter rides and buying her designer bags. Marcus was feeding her ego, turning her into his greatest advocate against any outside logic. Once he has the golden child completely under his spell, Dominique continues. He targets the parents. He strokes their egos. He makes them believe he is bringing them into an exclusive elite inner circle. He drops names, fakes international business calls, and creates an illusion of unlimited capital. Then, right when the parents are completely intoxicated by their new social status, he presents the trap, a joint investment. I feel a sudden sharp instinct to check on my father's current financial status. William has always been a deeply arrogant man, desperate to prove he is the smartest investor in the room. I pull up a secondary monitor and navigate to William's professional LinkedIn profile. I do not need to hack into his bank accounts to see the damage. William's own blinding ego has done the work for me. Right at the top of his public feed is a brand new, highly boastful update posted just 3 days ago. Thrilled to announce my latest venture, the post reads, accompanied by a photo of William holding a glass of scotch. I am officially partnering in a $5 million commercial real estate development project in downtown Atlanta alongside my brilliant future son-in-law, Marcus. Sometimes you have to leverage your past to build your future. I have proudly mortgaged the family estate to secure this incredible legacy for the Addams family. I stare at the screen in absolute disbelief. William did not just give Marcus a cash loan, he literally handed a seasoned con artist the deed to our family home. My parents had leveraged their entire existence, risking the roof over their heads just for the chance to play real estate moguls with a man whose real name they did not even know. Marcus had played them flawlessly, exploiting my father's greed until William voluntarily handed over the keys to his own destruction. He is going to drain them, Dominique says, reading the LinkedIn post over the shared screen. He gets the parents to leverage their hard-earned assets into a dummy corporate account he controls. Right before the wedding, he liquidates the funds, transfers the money offshore, and vanishes into thin air. That is exactly what he did to my startup. Except this time, I reply, my tone turning to absolute ice. He picked the wrong family to scam, because William's greed just gave me the exact financial thread I need to freeze him out. Suddenly, the encrypted cell phone sitting on my console vibrates violently. A message notification pops up on the screen. It is a text from a burner number, but I know exactly who it is from. Marcus is trying to establish dominance after my dramatic exit from the steakhouse. I open the message. Listen to me, you depressed college dropout, the text reads. Stay away from the wedding. You are an embarrassment. If you try to ruin this weekend for Victoria, I will personally leak your old medical records to every client you have. I know all about your little mental breakdowns. Know your place and stay out of my way. I read the threat twice. Marcus had clearly dug into my past, likely using my parents' cruel gossip to uncover my history of depression from my college years. He thinks he has found my vulnerability. He thinks I am ashamed. He thinks blackmail will force me back into the shadows. He has absolutely no idea that the woman he is threatening builds and destroys corporate empires before breakfast. I do not argue with him. I do not defend myself. I simply reach over to my secondary keyboard and pull up the live tracking software linked to Dominique's stolen assets. Through Aegis's secure network, I isolate the GPS transponder hidden inside the luxury vehicle Marcus purchased using Dominique's embezzled funds. I take a rapid screenshot of the exact satellite coordinates. Then I hack into the Chicago Department of Transportation's live traffic camera feed. I easily locate the specific interstate and capture a crisp, high-definition photo of the silver Porsche 911 Marcus is currently driving down the fast lane. I attach the GPS coordinates and the live traffic photo of his car to a new message. I do not type a paragraph. I do not explain who I am. I simply type a single devastating reply. Nice car. Too bad the registration is in Dominique's name. I hit send and watched the delivery receipt confirm Marcus had read the message. I did not have to wait long for the fallout. In less than 60 seconds, the typing indicator on his end appeared, then vanished. Appeared, then vanished again. He was panicking. Dominique chuckled from her monitor, the sound cold and entirely devoid of any humor. You broke his algorithm, Valerie. He is used to dealing with gullible victims, not apex predators. He thrives on controlling the narrative, and you just ripped the script right out of his hands. My encrypted console chimed, shattering the brief silence in the war room. It was not a burner number this time. The caller ID flashed my mother's name. I patched the audio through the main room speakers so Dominique and my entire forensic team could listen, then tapped the screen to accept the connection. Valerie, darling, we need to have a very serious conversation, Catherine said. Her syrupy, dripping tone of fake maternal concern was instantly recognizable, a weapon she had wielded against me since childhood. Marcus just showed us the deeply disturbing messages you have been sending him. He is incredibly worried about you, and frankly, your father and I are terrified. I kept my voice entirely deadpan, leaning back in my leather chair. Is that right, Mother? What exactly is Marcus terrified of? Your mental state. Valerie. Catherine sighed heavily into the receiver, laying the gaslighting on thick. He said you are having a severe manic episode. You are hallucinating that you live in some Malibu mansion and run a corporate firm. Sweetheart, you need to go back to your small apartment and rest. Let us get you some professional help before you completely embarrass yourself. You have always struggled with reality when Victoria is getting the attention she deserves. As she spoke, my hands flew across my mechanical keyboard. I did not engage with her fabricated narrative. I did not defend my Malibu command center, my vast wealth, or my sanity. I simply traced the digital ping of her cell phone signal confirming she was standing inside the family home in Atlanta, standing right next to the man who was currently robbing them blind. Catherine took my silence as submission. Her fake concern instantly evaporated, replaced by her trademark suffocating arrogance. You are just trying to lash out because Victoria is living an absolute fairy tale. In fact, Marcus just finalized the honeymoon plans. He booked a private jet to fly them directly to the Bahamas after the reception. A custom Gulfstream. You cannot ruin this for her, Valerie. You will not. A Gulfstream, one repeated, my eyes darting to a fresh terminal window on my screen. That sounds incredibly expensive, Mother. I muted my microphone for a fraction of a second. Hayes, I commanded the room. Pull flight manifests out of Atlanta and Newport for this Sunday. Filter for private charters heading to Nassau. Find that jet. Hayes's fingers blurred over his dual keyboards. Within seconds, a flight itinerary flashed onto my secondary monitor. Tail number N492 Echo Juliet. Chartered through an elite boutique aviation broker. I unmuted the line. Tell me, Mother. Did Marcus happen to mention exactly how he financed such a lavish expense? He is a venture capitalist! Valerie Catherine snapped sharply, irritated by my lack of awe. He manages millions! Paying $150,000 for a charter flight is pocket change to a man of his stature. Now I want you to promise me you will log off your computer, take your medication, and stay entirely away from Newport this weekend. I ignored her completely. My team had just cracked the billing invoice for the charter flight. The payment had not cleared from Vanguard Elite Properties. It had not cleared from any of Marcus's offshore shell accounts. It had been paid in full via a short-term, high-interest luxury line of credit. I drilled down into the loan origination file, bypassing the broker's basic encryption. The borrower name illuminated on my screen in stark, unforgiving white text. Valerie Adams. My blood ran absolute ice cold. I rapidly pulled up the loan application documents, Marcus had not just isolated my family, he had actively raided my father's filing cabinets. He had used my old childhood tax documents, my social security number, and my previous home address to fraudulently open a massive line of credit in my name. He was financing Victoria's dream honeymoon using my stolen identity. My parents had blindly given a predator unlimited access to their most sensitive family records. Dominique Duatry said softly, ensuring my mother could not hear the feed. He escalated. He used my social security number for the jet. Dominique's face hardened on the video screen, her eyes narrowing. He gets careless when he feels cornered. He is accelerating his timeline, Valerie. He knows the walls are closing in. Valerie, are you even listening to me? Catherine demanded through the speakers, her voice rising in pitch. You will not destroy your sister's happiness. Marcus is the best thing that has ever happened to this family. He is elevating us. Your father and I are finally getting the respect we deserve in this community. You are getting played. Mother, I stated, my voice dangerously low, stripped of any familial warmth. Marcus is not elevating you. He is financially executing you. Have you actually seen any legal paperwork for this commercial development William supposedly mortgaged the house for? I will not listen to your jealous delusions, Catherine shouted, her denial absolute. You are sick, Valerie. You have always been sick. She abruptly disconnected the call. The dial tone echoed loudly in the command center, a sharp contrast to the furious digital warfare happening on the screens around me. I did not have a single second to process my mother's harsh words. An alarm klaxon suddenly blared through the war room. It was a sharp, piercing sound that meant a critical financial threshold had just been breached. Red warning banners flooded the massive wall monitors, bathing the room in a crimson glow. Sarah sprinted from the back of the room, clutching a secured tablet. She bypassed Hayes and came straight to my desk, her face completely drained of color. Boss Sarah said, her voice tight with absolute urgency. We were monitoring your father's accounts just like you ordered. Marcus is not just taking their house. I stood up from my chair, my eyes locking onto the flashing red data streams. Report Sarah. He just initiated a priority wire transfer, she said, pulling the raw financial data onto my main screen. He bypassed the standard banking holds using the joint authorization your father gave him. Marcus is emptying William's entire 401k retirement pension. Every single dollar is currently being routed into an untraceable offshore crypto wallet. Every single dollar is currently being routed into an untraceable offshore crypto wallet. The magnitude of the theft hit me like a physical blow. $5 million. It was everything William had built over a 40-year career in finance, the sum total of his life's work, liquidated in seconds. If I let this transfer clear the blockchain, my parents would literally starve on the streets. They would lose the house, the pension, the savings, everything. For a fraction of a second, the heavy weight of their betrayal washed over me. They had been unspeakably cruel to me, dismissing my worth at every turn to worship a parasite who flattered their vanity. A dark, vindictive part of my mind whispered to let it happen, to sit back and let them suffer the absolute consequences of their own blinding greed. It would be poetic justice. But my professional ethics, the very foundation of the empire I had built from nothing, kicked in with ruthless efficiency. I do not let predators win. I do not let thieves walk away with my family's money, no matter how deeply that family has betrayed me. Lock it down! I barked, my voice cutting through the rising panic in the room. Sarah, get FinCEN on the secure federal line right now. Hayes, trace the routing numbers and establish an active block on the receiving node. Do not let those funds hit the decentralized mixer, or we will never recover the primary capital. Hayes was already moving, his hands flying across the terminal. He is using a highly sophisticated layered routing protocol through a dark bank in the Cayman Islands, he shouted over the heavy hum of the servers. It is scheduled to clear the final verification hurdle in exactly 4 minutes. If it hits the crypto wallet, the money is permanently gone, Valerie. It is not going anywhere, I replied, pulling up my encrypted direct line to a contact at the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Division. I hit the speed dial. The agent answered on the first ring. I need an immediate unilateral freeze on an outgoing wire from William Adams. I said, bypassing all standard pleasantries. We have a confirmed identity theft and fraudulent wire in progress. The perpetrator is actively draining a $5 million pension into an offshore account. I am transmitting the raw routing data to your terminal right now. The federal agent did not hesitate. Aegis had contracted for the government on multiple high-level asset recoveries, and my word carried the weight of a federal subpoena. The data stream on my main monitor shifted from a blaring red to flashing yellow as the Federal Hold Command collided with Marcus's illicit transfer network. I watched the digital progress bar inching toward completion. 90%. 95%. Then a massive green locked icon slammed across the center of my screen, halting the progress bar completely. The transfer was paralyzed. The funds were secured in a federal holding account trapped in digital purgatory. Marcus had just hit a reinforced titanium wall. 2,000 miles away in Atlanta, the atmosphere was entirely different. Marcus stood inside the private fitting room of a highly exclusive menswear boutique. The air smelled of rich leather and imported wool. He admired his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror, adjusting the lapels of a custom-tailored tuxedo that cost more than most people made in a month. An elderly tailor knelt at his feet, carefully pinning the hem of the trousers to ensure the break was flawless. Marcus smiled at his own reflection, completely intoxicated by his own brilliance. He was hours away from securing a $5 million payday entirely funded by the spectacular arrogance of William Adams. He had played the entire family like a cheap violin, manipulating their desperate need for status, and now he was getting dressed for his victory lap. Inside the breast pocket of his discarded jacket, his encrypted smartphone buzzed. Marcus waved the tailor away with a dismissive flick of his wrist. "Give me a moment," he commanded, stepping out of the fitting area and pulling the phone from his pocket. He fully expected to see the final confirmation receipt from his offshore banking node. He expected to see a screen filled with zeros, the ultimate trophy of a perfect, untraceable con. Instead, he saw a stark, terrifying security alert from his banking portal. Federal injunction executed. Account frozen. Code 409, fraudulent wire intercepted. The smug, arrogant smile vanished from his face instantly. The blood drained from his cheeks, leaving him a sickly, pale white. His heart slammed against his ribs as he aggressively tapped the screen, trying to refresh the application. He tried to access the dummy corporate account he had set up in William's name. Locked. He frantically swiped to pull up the high-yield credit line he had fraudulently opened using my social security number to pay for the private jet. Frozen. Every single digital door he had meticulously built over the past 6 months was slamming shut in his face simultaneously. He was completely locked out. He was entirely exposed. Blind panic hijacked his nervous system. Marcus shoved past the bewildered tailor, not even bothering to change out of the pinned tuxedo trousers. He grabbed his coat and burst out the heavy glass doors of the boutique, sprinting onto the busy Atlanta sidewalk. The humid southern air hit him, but a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. He paced frantically down the alleyway beside the shop, his mind racing to find a way out of the collapsing trap. The golden child. He needed Victoria. She was his only remaining leverage over William's assets. He dialed her number, his thumb shaking against the glass screen. Victoria answered on the second ring, her voice bubbling with oblivious joy. "Baby," she squealed. "The florist just showed me the samples for the reception centerpieces, and they are absolutely gorgeous. You are going to love the white orchids." "Victoria, listen to me." Marcus snapped, his voice sharp and ragged, completely abandoning his usual polished charm. He caught himself forcing a tone of breathless, manufactured panic. "Baby, something terrible has happened. The IRS just made a massive clerical error on my venture capital accounts. They put a temporary hold on my entire portfolio because of a banking glitch with the international auditors." "What?" Victoria gasped, the joy instantly vanishing from her voice. "But what about the private jet? What about the caterers?" "That is exactly the problem," Marcus lied, pacing faster down the alley, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. "The final vendor payments are bouncing. The venue is threatening to cancel everything. I need your dad to step up right now. I need him to take out a high-yield payday loan by tomorrow morning to cover the immediate cash flow gap until my account's clear. If he does not wire me the cash directly, the wedding is entirely off. The dominoes of their financial ruin were falling faster than any of them could comprehend. The morning sun rises over Newport, Rhode Island, burning away the coastal fog to reveal a wedding day built entirely on a foundation of spectacular lies. The sprawling lawn of a historic Gilded Age oceanfront estate has been transformed into an ostentatious display of fabricated wealth. Crystal vases overflow with thousands of imported white orchids. A massive, transparent event tent houses a pristine white dance floor surrounded by 12 massive 300-inch LED video walls designed to broadcast a custom wedding montage. Catherine struts through the gathering crowd of 300 elite guests, her chin tilted toward the sky. She glides across the manicured grass like minor royalty, completely intoxicated by the illusion of her elevated social status. William walks beside her, greeting supposed titans of industry with a firm handshake and a hollow mechanical smile. He has spent the last 12 hours desperately trying to reach his wealth manager, only to be met with automated out-of-service messages. The zero balance notification is permanently burned into his retinas. He is a man standing on the trapdoor of his own execution, completely oblivious to the fact that the lever has already been pulled. He clings to Marcus's promise of a simple bank glitch, choosing the comfort of absolute denial over the terrifying reality of his impending homelessness. Marcus plays the role of the billionaire visionary with flawless execution. He mingles effortlessly, introducing my parents to a dozen elegantly dressed individuals he claims are his wealthy relatives from Atlanta. It is a masterful, calculated touch. Dominique's forensic background checks have already confirmed these people are high-end character actors hired through a discreet boutique agency. They sip vintage champagne and spin fabricated stories of generational wealth and massive real estate portfolios, reinforcing the exact narrative my parents are so desperate to believe. But Marcus is not the only one running an operation today. My family thinks I am sitting alone in my small apartment, defeated and disgraced. They have absolutely no idea that Aegis is currently running the entire event. My undercover security operatives are seamlessly integrated into the venue staff. Men in crisp white catering uniforms discreetly adjust the radio earpieces hidden beneath their collars as they pour wine. Women disguised as event coordinators quietly secure the estate's heavy wrought iron perimeter gates with industrial locking mechanisms. A pair of my top electronic warfare technicians wearing the venue's official audio-visual vendor badges have already hardwired directly into the main control boards. They possess absolute control over every speaker, microphone, and LED screen on the property. No one leaves. No one speaks without my authorization. Thousands of miles away from the East Coast humidity, I sit comfortably on the sun-drenched patio of my Malibu estate. A gentle breeze rolls off the Pacific Ocean. I lift a crystal glass of vintage Pinot Noir to my lips, savoring the rich, complex notes as I stare at the multi-monitor setup Dominique's team hauled outside for me. I have a live multi-angle high-definition video feed of the entire reception. I see my father sweating through his custom tuxedo. I see my mother boasting to a hired actor about a corporate development project that does not actually exist. I see Marcus checking his encrypted phone every 3 minutes, his digital prison closing tighter around him as he realizes he cannot access a single dollar of his stolen funds. The reception hits its scheduled climax. The string quartet strikes up a soaring romantic melody. Marcus and Victoria step up to the center of the dance floor, moving toward a massive, absurdly ornate 7-tier wedding cake. The photographer circles them, barking instructions for the perfect shot. Victoria beams, radiating absolute triumph. She holds the silver cake knife ready to cut into her fabricated happily ever after. I set my wine glass down on the heavy glass table. I press a single button on my radio earpiece. Team Alpha. I state my voice perfectly calm and devoid of mercy. Deliver package 1. Less than 30 seconds later, a low, rhythmic thumping sound echoes over the coastline. The noise rapidly amplifies, vibrating through the crystal glasses on the reception tables. The string quartet falters, the cellist looking up in confusion as the deafening roar completely drowns out their music. Guests step out from under the transparent tent, shielding their eyes from the glaring sun. A sleek black private helicopter descends rapidly from the sky. The sheer force of the rotor wash flattens the imported orchids and sends the women's designer fascinators flying violently across the lawn. The chopper does not land. It hovers aggressively just feet above the estate's sprawling, manicured grass. The side door slides open. A man steps out. He is not wearing a flight suit. He is wearing a sharply tailored charcoal gray suit. He jumps lightly to the grass, completely unfazed by the chaotic wind, and walks with predatory purpose directly toward the main tent. Cradled in his hands is the massive high-tech black velvet gift box Dominique and I packed the night before. He strides straight through the parted sea of bewildered wealthy guests, walks directly up to the wedding cake, and places the heavy velvet box squarely on the pristine white table right in front of Marcus. The courier does not say a single word. He turns and walks away. The helicopter banks sharply and accelerates back out over the ocean, leaving a stunned, deafening silence in its wake. Victoria stares at the box, her eyes wide with shock. Tied to the golden latch is a heavy cream-colored cardstock tag. It reads in bold, elegant typography, "To the groom, from Valerie." The tension in the tent is instantly broken by Catherine. My mother steps forward, letting out a loud, highly theatrical scoff that echoes clearly through my intercepted audio feed. "See," she announces to the surrounding guests, her voice dripping with triumphant vindication. "I told you she would cave. She probably scraped together the $20,000 honeymoon check to beg for our forgiveness." Victoria's shock instantly melts back into her trademark arrogance. She reaches over and snatches the wireless microphone from the DJ's stand. "She wants an audience for my total submission. Let us see what my failure of a sister managed to beg, borrow, or steal for us." Victoria declares, projecting her voice through the massive venue speakers. She wants every single elite guest to witness her ultimate victory over the family disappointment. Victoria steps up to the table. She grabs the golden latch of the velvet box and dramatically unlatches it. She flings the heavy lid open. The guests lean in, whispering in anticipation of a massive cashier's check or a stack of bound cash. But there is no money. There is no check. Inside the plush velvet lining sits a custom-rigged high-definition iPad. The exact second the biometric lid clears the sensor, the iPad automatically powers on. The screen blazes to life, instantly transmitting a bypass signal to the devices my technicians planted in the sound booth. The custom software effortlessly hijacks the DJ's equipment. It overrides the venue's master server. Simultaneously, all 12 of the massive 300-inch LED screens surrounding the ballroom go pitch black, waiting for my broadcast to begin. The giant screens flicker to life, transitioning from pitch black to blinding high-definition color in a fraction of a second. A sharp, brief screech of audio feedback rips through the state-of-the-art sound system, instantly silencing the murmurs of the 300 guests. The audio blasts at maximum volume, vibrating through the crystal centerpieces and shaking the floorboards of the massive event tent. Everyone in the venue jerks their attention away from the custom-rigged iPad sitting on the cake table and stares up at the towering LED walls surrounding them. The video feed stabilizes into a crystal-clear hidden camera broadcast. The setting on the screen is instantly recognizable to anyone who frequents elite nightlife. It is the ultra-exclusive VIP lounge of a downtown Atlanta club, bathed in moody neon lighting and the ambient thumping of heavy bass. The timestamp in the bottom corner indicates the footage was recorded just 2 nights ago. Marcus dominates the center of the frame. He is sitting heavily on a plush leather sofa, heavily intoxicated, his expensive tie loosened and a glass of dark amber bourbon resting on his knee. He looks completely relaxed, arrogant, and utterly oblivious to the fact that the stunning, attractive woman sitting next to him is one of my elite undercover operatives. She is playing the role of a wealthy, impressed socialite, perfectly leaning in and stroking his massive ego until he simply cannot resist bragging about his ultimate conquest. His voice blasts through the Newport estate, entirely overriding the shocked silence of the crowd. "This family is so stupid it is almost sad," Marcus slurs on the massive screens, taking a lazy, confident sip of his bourbon. In the center of the dance floor, the color instantly drains from Victoria's face. The silver cake knife slips from her trembling fingers and clatters loudly against the pristine white floor. At the head table, Catherine physically recoils, as if she has been struck across the face. Her carefully constructed facade of aristocratic elegance shatters. The guests she has spent all evening trying to impress are now staring at the screens in absolute horror. On the broadcast, Marcus leans closer to the hidden camera, his eyes gleaming with malicious amusement. "The old man practically handed me the deed to his house," he boasts, laughing into his glass. William Adams grips the edge of the linen-covered table so hard his knuckles turn stark white. The automated banking alert he received earlier finally snaps into devastating, irreversible focus. The zero balance, the foreclosure proceeding, the commercial leverage loan. It was not a temporary bank glitch. He had voluntarily signed away his entire existence to a seasoned predator, blinded by the promise of joining an elite social echelon that did not actually exist. William's chest heaves as the absolute reality of his impending homelessness crushes the breath out of his lungs. He is entirely bankrupt. The digital Marcus chuckles, a dark, mocking sound that completely destroys his refined billionaire persona. "Victoria," he sneers, shaking his head in mock disbelief. "She thinks this moissanite glass ring is a 5-carat diamond." Victoria lets out a choked, hysterical gasp. She reflexively grabs her left hand, staring down at the massive glittering stone on her ring finger. The ultimate symbol of her superiority, the weapon she had used to belittle me and everyone else around her for the past 6 months, is nothing but cheap manufactured glass. A ripple of shocked whispers sweeps through the crowd. The society columnists in attendance are already pulling out their phones, eagerly documenting the spectacular, humiliating destruction of the Adams family. Victoria is being exposed as an absolute fraud in front of the very people she desperately wanted to rule. "I am taking the cash gifts and flying to the Bahamas tomorrow night," the video Marcus casually reveals, finishing the last drop of his bourbon and setting the glass down. "Let them deal with the bankruptcy. They deserve it for being so incredibly gullible." The real Marcus, standing frozen next to the wedding cake, finally snaps out of his paralyzed shock. Pure, unadulterated panic completely hijacks his nervous system. He lunges toward the DJ booth, screaming at the technician to cut the power, to pull the plugs, to do absolutely anything to stop the broadcast. But the technician simply steps aside, revealing the Aegis Tactical logo pinned beneath his lapel. "My operatives have completely locked down the entire audio-visual grid. There is no off switch." Marcus spins around, his eyes frantically scanning the transparent walls of the event tent. He abandons Victoria, abandoning the entire illusion, and sprints directly toward the main exit. He does not make it 10 feet. 4 men in crisp catering uniforms step seamlessly into his path, their stances wide, their hands resting calmly near their concealed tactical belts. They form an impenetrable human wall between Marcus and his only avenue of escape. The federal marshals waiting outside the locked gates will be making their entrance very shortly. On the massive LED screens, the hidden camera footage abruptly cuts out. The visual feed drops entirely, leaving the tent bathed only in the golden glow of the chandeliers. The sudden silence in the venue is absolute and deafening. Thousands of miles away on my Malibu patio, I lean toward the high-fidelity microphone sitting on my glass table. I take a slow, measured breath, letting the heavy, suffocating silence of the Newport ballroom stretch for 5 agonizing seconds. I want them to feel the trap snapping completely shut. My live audio feed engages, replacing the video. My voice echoes through the venue, crisp, cold, and ringing with absolute authority. "Condition number 4 was $20,000 for the honeymoon," I announced to the silent room. "I decided to pay it by wiping out the $150,000 loan you took out using my stolen Social Security number. Oh, and condition 5, no poor dates. I think the groom handled that perfectly." For a fraction of a second, the sheer audacity of my broadcast hangs suspended in the humid Newport air. The 300 elite guests, the hired actors, the society columnists, everyone remains perfectly frozen. Then the dam breaks. Pandemonium erupts with the force of a detonated explosive. The collective gasp from the crowd sucks the remaining oxygen out of the massive event tent. The perfectly orchestrated illusion of the Addams family wealth shatters into a million jagged pieces, broadcasted for the entire eastern seaboard's high society to witness. Victoria lets out a guttural, ear-piercing scream. The heavy silver cake knife slips from her trembling fingers. It hits the pristine white dance floor with a sharp clang, splattering a dollop of vanilla icing across the toe of Marcus's bespoke Italian leather shoes. She backs away from the 7-tier cake as if it is suddenly radioactive. Her hands fly to her face, smearing her flawless, expensive makeup. She looks wildly around the room, making frantic eye contact with the very people she had spent the last 6 months trying to impress. The society reporters are not just typing on their phones anymore. They are actively recording her breakdown. The elite circles she desperately clawed her way into are now looking at her, not with envy, but with undisguised pity and revulsion. The moissanite glass ring on her finger catches the golden light of the chandeliers, a glaring, inescapable symbol of her total humiliation. At the head table, the destruction is far more visceral. William Addams violently grips the edge of the linen tablecloth, pulling it forward and sending crystal champagne flutes crashing to the floor. He stumbles backward, his hand flying to his chest, clutching the lapel of his expensive tuxedo. His face turns the color of wet ash. The automated notification of a zero balanced the offshore routing numbers, the frozen leverage loan, the sudden inability to reach his wealth manager. The pieces slammed together in his mind with terrifying, undeniable clarity. It was never a bank glitch. The $5 million, his entire life's work, his pension, his legacy is completely gone. He sways heavily on his feet, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Catherine lunges forward, grabbing his arm, her own face twisted in a mask of absolute terror, as she finally realizes the elite status she has been parading all evening is entirely bankrupt. Marcus is drowning in his own manufactured nightmare. The sweat pours down his forehead, soaking the collar of his tailored shirt. He spins wildly in circles, pointing frantically at the massive pitch-black LED screens that had just broadcasted his full confession. "It is a deep fake," Marcus screams, his voice cracking with sheer desperation, completely abandoning his suave billionaire persona. He waves his arms frantically at the surrounding crowd. "Do not listen to a word of it. It is artificial intelligence. Turn the screens off. Turn the power off right now." No one moves to help him. The hired actors portraying his wealthy Atlanta relatives exchange nervous glances and begin quietly backing away toward the perimeter. The actual guests stare at him with naked disgust. Marcus realizes his words are useless. The charm offensive has completely failed. The federal holding account, the locked credit lines, the frozen venture capital portfolio. His digital prison has now become a physical one. He looks toward the DJ booth, but my Aegis technicians are standing firm, their arms crossed. He looks toward the side exits of the transparent tent, but the 4 men in crisp white catering uniforms step forward in perfect unison, their hands resting deliberately near their concealed tactical belts. The perimeter is fully secured. Pure animalistic survival instinct takes over. Marcus abandons Victoria, leaving his hysterical bride sobbing on the dance floor. He spots the primary exit, the massive, heavy oak double doors leading back into the main corridor of the historic Gilded Age estate. "Out of my way," Marcus bellows, shoving a wealthy socialite aside. He sprints across the ballroom, his polished shoes slipping slightly on the spilled champagne. He knocks over a cocktail table, sending a massive arrangement of white orchids crashing to the floor. He does not look back. He just runs his eyes locked on the heavy brass handles of the double doors. If he can just make it into the main house, he can navigate the servant hallways, bypass the locked perimeter gates, and disappear into the Rhode Island night. He is a predator, fleeing the trap, completely driven by blind panic. He closes the distance rapidly, 10 feet, 5 feet. He reaches out his sweating hands, bracing his shoulders to shove his full body weight against the heavy oak wood. Before his fingertips can even brush the polished brass handles, the massive double doors swing open violently from the outside. Marcus skids to a halt, his leather shoes squealing against the hardwood floor. He nearly loses his balance, his arms windmilling as he stares into the main corridor. The chaotic noise of the ballroom behind him seems to instantly evaporate, replaced by a suffocating, terrifying silence. Standing dead center in the doorway is Dominique. She is not wearing a catering uniform or a guest's evening gown. She is wearing a razor-sharp, immaculately tailored blood-red power suit that radiates absolute authority. She stands with perfect, lethal posture, blocking the entire exit. The warm, golden light of the hallway casts a long shadow across the ballroom floor, falling directly over Marcus's trembling feet. Flanking Dominique are three heavily armed United States federal agents. They are dressed in full tactical gear, heavy Kevlar vests, bearing bold yellow federal lettering, their hands resting securely on their utility belts. They step into the ballroom in perfect synchronization, their eyes locking onto Marcus with cold, professional efficiency. Marcus takes a slow, terrified step backward. His mouth opens, but no sound comes out. The suave con artist, the supposed billionaire visionary, is completely paralyzed. Dominique slowly steps over the threshold. She looks Marcus up and down, taking in his sweat-soaked tuxedo, his shaking hands, and his wide, panicked eyes. A slow, terrifyingly serene smile spreads across her face. "Sorry I am late to the wedding," Dominique announces, her voice carrying through the silent ballroom, dripping with lethal, flawless elegance. "I came to collect my husband." The words hit Marcus like a physical strike. He whips his head around, his eyes wild and darting as he stares at the armed federal agents blocking his primary escape route. Pure, unadulterated panic completely overrides his polished facade. He abandons the main double doors and violently pivots toward the back of the ballroom, his eyes locking onto the swinging wooden doors of the catering kitchen. It is his last, desperate gamble. He shoves past a terrified bridesmaid, sending a silver tray of crystal champagne flutes shattering across the pristine white dance floor. He bursts through the swinging doors, expecting to find a labyrinth of service corridors and a clear path to the estate gardens. He does not make it past the stainless steel prep stations. Two men in crisp white catering uniforms drop their silver serving trays. They move with terrifying military precision, entirely abandoning their roles as hospitality staff. Before Marcus can even register their presence, the first undercover Aegis operative sweeps his legs out from under him. The second operative drives a heavy, punishing shoulder directly into Marcus's chest. Marcus hits the industrial kitchen floor with a bone-jarring thud. A prep cart shakes, sending a cascade of braised scallops and expensive reduction sauce crashing down around him. He thrashes, kicking blindly and screaming obscenities, but the operatives pin him to the wet tile, instantly twisting his arms behind his back with practiced, ruthless efficiency. The three federal agents storm through the swinging doors seconds later. They haul Marcus up by his ruined, sauce-stained tuxedo jacket. Cold steel ratchets around his wrists with a sharp, definitive click. They drag him back out into the brilliant glow of the main ballroom, his custom-tailored trousers smeared with grease, his carefully coiffed hair plastered to his sweating forehead. The illusion of the untouchable billionaire vanishes, revealing nothing more than a cornered, desperate thief. Victoria watches her supposed visionary husband being paraded through the center of her reception like a common criminal. Her mind simply cannot process the absolute destruction of her reality. She lets out a shrill, guttural shriek that completely silences the murmurs of the 300 elite guests. She completely loses her grip on sanity. She hikes up the heavy silk layers of her custom designer gown, her face contorting into a mask of pure, unfiltered hysteria. She bypasses Marcus entirely and charges straight at the woman standing in the doorway. "Who are you?" Victoria screams, her voice cracking as she lunges at Dominique, her hands curled into claws. "Get out of my wedding! Get out of my house!" Dominique does not flinch. She does not take a single step backward. She watches Victoria's unhinged temper tantrum with the bored, clinical detachment of a scientist observing an insect. As Victoria closes the distance, ready to strike, one of the federal agents steps forward to intercept, but Dominique simply raises a perfectly manicured hand to wave him off. Slowly, Dominique reaches into the breast pocket of her blood-red blazer. She pulls out a crisp, heavy piece of parchment paper bearing a raised government watermark and an official state seal. With smooth, lethal elegance, she steps directly into Victoria's path and presses the document flat against the bodice of Victoria's heavily beaded wedding gown. "I am his legal wife," Dominique states, her voice ringing clear and steady across the dead silent ballroom. "You are just victim number 5, sweetheart, and that dress you are wearing was bought with my stolen credit cards." Victoria stares down at the marriage certificate pressed against her chest. The names Dominique and Marcus are printed in bold, undeniable ink, dated 3 years prior. She gasps, stumbling backward as if the paper has physically burned her. Dominique steps forward, closing the gap, her voice lowering into a register of absolute terrifying pity. He runs the exact same long con every time. He finds a woman desperate for validation and a family desperate for status. He feeds you the lies you are begging to hear. He isolates your assets and he drains you entirely dry. He did it in Miami. He did it in Dallas. And now he has done it to you. You are not a billionaire's wife, Victoria. You are the punchline to a federal wire fraud indictment. The final remnants of Victoria's ego shatter. Her knees buckle entirely. She collapses onto the white dance floor in a massive heap of silken tulle, burying her face in her hands and sobbing hysterically. The moissanite glass ring on her finger catches the light of the chandeliers, a glaring, inescapable symbol of her absolute foolishness. The hired actors portraying Marcus's wealthy Atlanta family do not stay to watch the fallout. They are already slipping out the side exits, quietly abandoning their roles to avoid federal questioning. The real elite guests, the titans of industry my parents so desperately wanted to impress, are holding up their smartphones. They are recording every single second of the Addams family's spectacular social annihilation. The society columnists are already typing furious drafts to their editors. The disgrace is absolute and permanent. The federal agents march Marcus through the center of the room. He does not look at Victoria crying on the floor. He does not look at my parents. He keeps his eyes glued to his ruined shoes, stripped of every ounce of his unearned arrogance. The heavy oak doors close behind him, sealing his fate in a federal holding cell. At the edge of the dance floor, William Addams is not looking at his arrested son-in-law. He is leaning heavily against a decorative marble pillar, his face a sickly grayish purple. He is clutching the center of his chest, his breathing shallow, rapid, and erratic. The bank glitch, the frozen pension, the offshore routing numbers, the absolute evaporation of his entire legacy. It is all brutally, irreversibly real. He mortgaged his home, liquidated his savings, and destroyed his actual daughter to impress a man who was actively robbing him blind. He is entirely bankrupt. As William struggles to draw oxygen into his failing lungs, a man in a sharp black suit parts through the crowd of whispering guests. It is the general manager of the Newport estate, holding a heavy leather billing folio. He walks with brisk, uncompromising purpose. He stops directly in front of William, completely ignoring Catherine, who is paralyzed with shock nearby, and entirely ignoring the weeping bride on the floor. "Sir," the venue manager says, his voice cold, professional, and devoid of any previous warmth. "I am sorry to add to this disruption, but the primary credit card you put on file for the $200,000 open bar and catering just bounced. Every secondary account you provided is currently declining as fraudulent." He flips the leather folio open, exposing a massive unpaid invoice printed on heavy cardstock. "How would you like to settle this?" The venue manager stands perfectly still, extending the heavy leather folio toward William's trembling hands. The astronomical figure printed at the bottom of the invoice represents just the first wave of a massive financial tsunami about to crush him. William cannot lift his arms. His muscles simply refuse to obey. He stares blankly at the crushed white orchids and spilled champagne scattered across the pristine dance floor. The reality of his absolute, irreversible ruin anchors him to the spot. The remaining guests do not wait around to witness the financial execution. The exodus is swift, brutal, and entirely devoid of sympathy. Wealthy socialites hike up their couture gowns and practically sprint toward the valet station, desperate to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of the Addams family. The whispers are no longer hushed, they are loud, vicious, and mocking. The society columnists are the last to leave, snapping a few final ruthless photos of Victoria weeping in a puddle of silk and tulle before rushing out to file their career-making exposes. Within minutes, the magnificent flower-draped event tent is completely deserted, save for the Addams family, the unyielding venue manager, and my undercover operatives. The men in crisp white catering uniforms begin systematically dismantling the hidden cameras and audio equipment, moving with calm, military efficiency around the sobbing bride. William sways on his feet. The pieces of his destroyed life fall into place with agonizing clarity. His offshore accounts are completely empty. His lifelong pension is entirely liquidated. The historic Newport estate they rented to project an illusion of extreme wealth is now demanding a fortune he no longer possesses. The commercial leverage loan he took out against their suburban home to secure Marcus's phantom venture capital has already triggered a default cascade. The bank will seize the property by Monday morning. He has absolutely nothing left. He traded his daughter, his home, and his dignity for a mirage. Catherine finally snaps out of her paralyzed state. The aristocratic facade she wore like a protective shield entirely melts away, revealing the panicked, desperate woman underneath. She looks at her husband's gray, hollow face. She looks at her golden child sobbing hysterically on the floor, clutching a worthless piece of manufactured glass. Her perfect vision of high society dominance is completely dead. But instead of accepting the truth, her mind frantically searches for her usual coping mechanism. She cannot face her own greed. She needs a scapegoat. She needs the person she has always blamed whenever reality failed to meet her manicured delusions. Catherine snatches her phone from her designer clutch. Her manicured fingers aggressively stab at the screen. Thousands of miles away on my Malibu patio, my phone illuminates against the glass tabletop. I watch her name flash across the screen. I do not answer immediately. I take a slow, measured sip of my iced lemon water, listening to the rhythmic crashing of the Pacific waves against the shore. I let it ring 4 times, letting her panic simmer and boil over before calmly pressing the green button. Catherine does not offer a single word of apology. She does not ask if I am okay. She bypasses the entire catastrophe of her own limitless greed and launches directly into a venomous, unhinged attack. "You knew!" Catherine shrieks into the phone, her voice echoing shrilly across the empty Newport ballroom. "You knew he was a fraud, and you let this happen. You deliberately set us up." I listen to her ragged, heavy breathing over the line. It is the exact same tone she used when Victoria failed her college entrance exams, and Catherine blamed me for studying too loudly in the next room and distracting her genius sister. It is the exact same aggressive gaslighting she deployed when Victoria crashed her first car, and Catherine screamed at me for letting her borrow the keys instead of driving her myself. When Victoria stole my savings to buy designer handbags, Catherine accused me of leaving the money out to tempt her. It is never Victoria's fault. It is never Catherine's fault. It is always my responsibility to absorb their failures and shield them from the consequences of their own actions. "You destroyed your sister's life," Catherine wails, her voice echoing through the speaker so loudly that the venue manager steps back in sheer discomfort. "You sat there with your billions of dollars and watched us lose everything. You let a criminal walk into our home and take our money. You planned this whole thing because you were jealous of her. You are a monster." She is hyperventilating now, completely unglued, demanding that I fix the situation, demanding that I transfer funds immediately to cover the bounced checks, demanding that I use my federal connections to get their money back from Marcus. She is still treating me like the family servant barking orders from the sinking deck of a ship she sank herself. I do not raise my voice. I do not defend myself. I lean back against the plush white cushions of my patio chair. I watch the brilliant orange and purple hues of the sunset reflect off the calm, glassy surface of the ocean. The coastal breeze is warm, gentle, and completely serene. The contrast between my absolute peace and her total destruction is poetic. The silence stretches over the phone line, thick and heavy, until Catherine finally stops screaming and waits for my obedience. "I was going to tell you, Mom," I reply, my voice dropping to a register of absolute unbreakable ice. But condition number 2 clearly stated I wasn't allowed to sit at the family table. Enjoy the honeymoon. I hang up the phone. I drop the phone onto the glass patio table, the sharp clatter echoing against the crashing Pacific waves. I do not feel a shred of guilt. I feel exactly nothing. The surgical precision of my extraction is complete. My family wanted to play a high-stakes game of deception, and they finally met the house. The house always wins. Fast forward exactly 1 week. The brutal, unforgiving reality of American banking laws sets in with the speed of a falling guillotine. William Adams learns a devastating permanent lesson about offshore shell companies. When you voluntarily sign over the deed of your primary residence to secure a phantom commercial leverage loan, you forfeit every legal protection afforded to a standard homeowner. Marcus had buried the transfer clauses deep within the 100-page venture capital agreements William was too eager and too arrogant to properly vet. The moment Marcus was arrested and his fraudulent corporate entities collapsed under federal indictment, the banks moved in to liquidate the remaining physical assets. There is no grace period. There is no drawn-out foreclosure negotiation or opportunity to appeal. There is only the shrill, demanding knock of the local county sheriffs at 7 in the morning. William opens his grand mahogany front door in his silk bathrobe, fully expecting a delivery of imported coffee beans or a visit from his tailored landscaper. Instead, he finds 3 uniformed officers holding a court-ordered eviction mandate. Catherine stands frozen at the top of the grand staircase, her face stripped of all makeup, her aristocratic illusion physically ripped away. The officers do not care about her country club memberships, her local charity board positions, or her carefully curated neighborhood reputation. They hand William a clipboard and give the Adams family exactly 20 minutes to gather whatever essential belongings they can fit into standard-issue black plastic trash bags. The humiliation is absolute and highly public. Neighbors who had attended the disastrous Newport wedding reception just days prior now stand on their manicured lawns, watching the spectacle unfold in real time. They hold their morning coffee mugs, their eyes wide with poorly concealed glee, as William, Catherine, and Victoria are marched out of their own front door by armed law enforcement. The bank has already seized William's imported luxury sedan and Catherine's pristine SUV directly from the driveway. The only vehicle not legally tied to the seized assets is a rusted 10-year-old sedan William kept hidden in the back garage for his occasional weekend fishing trips. They shove their bulky black trash bags into the peeling trunk of the ancient car. William's hands shake so violently he drops the keys twice on the asphalt. Catherine refuses to make eye contact with anyone hiding her face behind oversized sunglasses and a silk scarf. Victoria sits in the back seat staring blankly at the torn vinyl upholstery, her mind completely fractured by the sheer velocity of their fall from grace. They drive away from their affluent suburb, leaving behind the only identity they ever valued. By nightfall, they are forced to pull into the glowing neon parking lot of a cheap, rundown roadside motel on the industrial outskirts of the city. The contrast is violently jarring. Gone are the Egyptian cotton sheets, the vaulted ceilings, and the crystal chandeliers. They are abruptly replaced by flickering fluorescent bulbs, brown water-stained ceilings, and the overwhelming stench of stale cigarette smoke embedded in the thin polyester bedspreads. William sits on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring blindly at his trembling hands. He has not spoken a single word since the sheriffs handed him the eviction notice. Catherine paces the narrow strip of stained carpet, muttering incoherently about calling elite lawyers they can no longer afford to retain. The next morning, the crushing reality of their new financial bracket forces Victoria out of the motel room. Her stomach cramps with intense hunger. She crosses the cracked asphalt parking lot, her scuffed designer shoes completely out of place against the greasy pavement, and pushes through the dingy glass doors of an adjacent convenience store. She bypasses the fresh deli counter she is accustomed to and walks numbly toward the aisles displaying instant ramen noodles and dented cans of heavily processed soup. She gathers the absolute cheapest items she can find, her hands shaking as she calculates the loose change rattling in her coat pocket. She approaches the sticky linoleum checkout counter, her eyes downcast in absolute crushing shame. As the bored cashier slowly scans the cheap food, Victoria glances blankly toward the magazine rack positioned near the register. Her breath catches violently in her throat. Her heart completely stops. Staring back at her from the glossy cover of the latest issue of Forbes magazine is my face. I am wearing a sharp custom-tailored suit standing with lethal confidence against the backdrop of my expansive Malibu estate. My arms are crossed, my expression projecting the exact same unyielding authority I used to completely dismantle their fake empire. The bold, undeniable headline stretches across the bottom of the cover in stark white lettering. Valerie's Aegis, the $100 million crisis firm, protecting America's elite. Victoria grips the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning stark white. The sheer magnitude of her miscalculation hits her with the force of a freight train. While she was desperately clawing her way into a fake high society circle through a manipulative con artist, I was quietly building a legitimate $100 million empire protecting the very people she worshipped. I was not the family disappointment. I was not the socially awkward liability they needed to hide. I was the apex predator in a corporate jungle they could not even comprehend. She snatches the magazine from the rack, tossing her remaining crumpled dollar bills at the bewildered cashier, and abandons her cheap groceries entirely. Victoria sprints across the busy street, dodging morning traffic, her lungs burning as she bursts through the flimsy door of their motel room. She is screaming, hyperventilating, waving the glossy magazine wildly in the air. "Look at this!" Victoria shrieks, hurling the magazine onto the stained bedspread directly in front of William and Catherine. "Look at her!" William and Catherine stare down at my face on the cover. They read the headline, "The $100 million valuation." The undeniable confirmation of my absolute dominance in the elite crisis management sector. The color completely drains from Catherine's face. William lets out a choked, devastated gasp. The realization crashes down on them, heavy and suffocating. They did not just throw away a daughter. They deliberately, maliciously alienated a multimillionaire who possessed the exact resources, connections, and power required to save them from total financial ruin. They chose a fraudulent predator over their own blood, completely blinded by their obsessive greed and vanity. Panic instantly replaces their despair. The crushing weight of their bankruptcy is momentarily overridden by a desperate, frantic delusion. They look at each other, a silent, unspoken agreement passing rapidly between them. They still believe they can manipulate the situation. They still believe they can play the family card and force me to fix their mistakes. Without a single word, William lunges for the black trash bags scattered across the cheap motel floor. Catherine grabs her battered purse. Victoria scrambles for the car keys. They violently shove their pathetic remaining belongings back into the rusted sedan. William slams the car into gear, his foot pressing heavily on the gas pedal. They speed out of the motel parking lot, leaving black tire marks on the asphalt, pointing the hood of the beaten-down car directly west. The grueling, relentless drive across the country takes exactly 72 hours of pure, unmitigated hell. Inside the cramped, stale cabin of the rusted sedan, the illusion of the aristocratic Addams family completely rots away. The air conditioning fails somewhere near the Nevada border, forcing them to roll down the windows and swallow the suffocating, exhaust-choked highway air. William White knuckles the steering wheel, his eyes bloodshot and sunken, his jaw locked in a permanent silent grind of defeat. He drives until his hands cramp and his vision blurs, propelled entirely by blind panic. In the back seat, Victoria remains in a state of catatonic shock. She wears the same sweat-stained sweatpants and oversized t-shirt she bought at the convenience store. She stares blankly at the torn vinyl upholstery hugging her knees to her chest. She does not speak. She barely blinks. The golden child, the supposed billionaire socialite, is completely paralyzed by the absolute destruction of her vanity. Catherine sits in this passenger seat, vibrating with a toxic cocktail of anxiety and aggressive entitlement. She mutters frantically under her breath the entire journey, obsessively rehearsing the manipulative speeches she plans to deploy the moment they arrive. She convinces herself that the familial bond is an unbreakable contract, conveniently forgetting how easily she severed that bond when I was no longer useful to her social climbing agenda. She firmly believes she can simply demand my resources, demand my protection, and demand that I rebuild the empire she carelessly handed over to a federal criminal. 3 days later, the sputtering, whining engine of their beaten-down sedan struggles up the steep, winding incline of the Pacific Coast Highway. They turn off the main road and approach the exact GPS coordinates listed in the business directory for my private residence. The rusted car groans to a halt in front of a massive, imposing barrier of reinforced, brushed steel. The gates of my Malibu estate tower 15 feet high, flanked by smooth concrete walls that offer absolutely zero visibility into the property. There are no decorative wrought iron vines. There are no welcoming garden displays. It is a sleek, impenetrable fortress designed and fortified by the very security firm I built from the ground up. High-definition lenses track the vehicle's approach from multiple hidden angles. Before William even shifts the car into park, Catherine violently throws open the passenger door. She stumbles out onto the pristine, sun-baked driveway. Her designer clothes are hopelessly wrinkled and stained with fast food grease. Her hair, usually sprayed into an immaculate helmet of blonde waves, hangs in limp, greasy strands around her pale face. She marches directly toward the glowing blue interface of the high-tech intercom system mounted securely into the stone pillar. She slams the palm of her hand against the call button. "Valerie." Catherine shrieks, her voice cracking with sheer desperation, the sound completely devoid of her usual aristocratic polish. "It's Mommy! Please open the gate! We have nothing!" Victoria hasn't stopped crying. "We're blood. You have to save us!" High above the crashing Pacific waves, safely secured within the climate-controlled environment of my command suite, I sit perfectly still. The walls of my office are lined with a seamless grid of 4K security monitors. I hold a cup of steaming black coffee, watching the live crystal-clear feed from the front gate. I tap a key on my console, zooming the primary camera directly onto Catherine's face. I can see the deep lines of exhaustion bracketing her mouth. I can see the chipped, ruined remains of her expensive French manicure as she frantically mashes the intercom button over and over again. I look past her, zooming in on the rusted sedan. I see William slumped over the steering wheel, utterly broken. I see Victoria huddled in the back seat, a shivering, pathetic shadow of her former arrogant self. They look completely destroyed. They look like people who have lost every single thing that gave them value. And as I watch them sweat and panic on the hot asphalt, I search myself for a reaction. I wait for the surge of righteous anger. I wait for the sting of lingering betrayal. I wait for the vindictive thrill of watching my abusers finally brought low, but I feel absolutely nothing. The emotional void is profound and clinical. Watching them beg at my reinforced gates triggers a cascade of razor-sharp, highly specific memories. I watch Catherine weep about having nothing, and I vividly remember the bone-chilling nights I cried myself to sleep on a thin, lumpy mattress in my unheated college apartment. I remember staring at a negative bank balance, desperately trying to calculate how to afford basic groceries, while Catherine cheerfully swiped her platinum card to fund Victoria's luxurious 2-week ski excursions in Aspen. I watch Victoria sobbing in the back of a broken-down car, and I remember standing completely alone on my college graduation day, clutching a cheap paper folder, while my parents skipped the ceremony entirely to attend Victoria's casual yacht party. I remember the distinct, casual cruelty of their rejection. I remember how easily they discarded me when I failed to fit their narrative of superficial perfection. They did not care about blood when I was starving. They did not care about family when I was struggling to survive. They only invoke the word family now because they need a host to drain. They are not my family. They are just strangers on a screen. Catherine hits the button again, her voice growing hoarse, her fists slamming against the cold steel panel. Please, you cannot leave us out here. I set my coffee cup down on the polished black marble of my desk. I reach forward and run my fingertip across the glass interface of the security console. I do not engage the microphone to speak to them directly. They do not deserve the sound of my voice. I simply initiate the custom security protocol I coded weeks ago specifically for this exact moment. Outside the gates, Catherine pauses her frantic pounding. The heavy silence of the coastal highway is abruptly broken by the crisp, perfectly modulated chime of the intercom speaker firing to life. The AI automated voice of the gate system echoes loud and clear over the speakers, cutting through the hot Malibu air. Access denied. To enter the premises, the owner requires you to fulfill 5 conditions. The metallic artificial tone of the security system vanishes. A sharp, definitive click echoes from the stone pillar. The line goes live. When I finally speak, my actual voice crackles through the high-definition exterior speakers. It is perfectly modulated, terrifyingly steady, and completely devoid of any familial warmth. I am not speaking to a mother, a father, or a sister. I am dictating terms to hostile trespassers. Condition 1. I state my voice cutting through the humid Malibu air like a scalpel. A full, unredacted front-page apology, printed in the Chicago Tribune, publicly detailing your financial crimes, your association with a federal fraudster, and your previous attempts to sabotage my career. Outside the gate, Catherine physically recoils as if she has been struck. Victoria presses her face against the smeared glass of the rusted sedan, her mouth hanging open. William stares at the speaker, his jaw working furiously as he tries to process the absolute reversal of our power dynamic. Condition 2. I continue smoothly. You will sign a binding, irrevocable legal document waiving any future claim to filial support. You will officially surrender any hypothetical rights to my estate, my corporate assets, and my crisis management firm. You will accept in writing that my wealth is permanently inaccessible to you. Condition 3. You will submit a formal recorded confession to the federal prosecutors handling Marcus's wire fraud indictment. You will detail exactly how you willingly bypassed standard banking regulations to secure that phantom leverage loan, fully admitting your complicity in the collapse of your own estate. Condition 4. Victoria will immediately surrender that fraudulent moissanite ring to the federal bankruptcy court as documented evidence of the scam, permanently relinquishing her delusion of being a billionaire socialite. Condition 5. You will step away from my security perimeter, return to your vehicle, and leave this neighborhood within exactly 60 seconds. For a moment, there is nothing but the sound of the Pacific Ocean crashing against the cliffs below my property. Then the fragile remnants of William's sanity completely shatter. The polished, arrogant patriarch who used to dictate my worth based on my social compliance entirely disappears. He morphs into a rabid, cornered animal. He lunges at the reinforced steel gate. He kicks the solid metal barrier with his scuffed dress shoe, the impact sending a dull, heavy thud through the intercom microphone. He kicks it again and again, his face turning a dangerous, blotchy purple. "You spoiled brat," William screams at the top of his lungs. The audio feed picks up the ragged, desperate tearing of his vocal cords. "We gave you life. We put a roof over your head. We fed you. You have hundreds of millions of dollars. Are you seriously going to sit in your mansion and let your own parents rot in a roadside motel?" He grips the steel bars, shaking them with all his failing strength. He demands absolute loyalty, based purely on biology, conveniently omitting the decades of emotional neglect and financial abuse. He wants to leverage the concept of family to drain my bank accounts completely, ignoring the fact that he traded my childhood peace of mind to fund Victoria's limitless vanity. He screams about the sacrifices of parenthood, completely oblivious to the bitter irony that he willingly sacrificed my future to impress a convicted felon. Catherine joins him at the gate, her manicured hands slapping against the cold steel. She is sobbing hysterically, demanding that I remember who raised me, begging me to transfer just a fraction of my corporate valuation to save them from the indignity of public poverty. She lists the expensive summer camps Victoria attended, the luxury cars they bought her, somehow twisting their blatant favoritism into an argument for why I now owe them my protection. From the quiet sanctuary of my command suite, I watched their collective meltdown unfold in brilliant ultra-high definition resolution on my wall of 4K monitors. I can see the sweat dripping down William's forehead. I can see the spittle flying from his lips as he curses my name. I can see the sheer, unadulterated terror in Catherine's wide, desperate eyes. Years ago, witnessing this level of parental rage would have sent me into a paralyzing panic. I would have folded immediately, desperately apologizing and emptying my meager savings account just to restore the peace. I remember the countless nights I cried myself to sleep in my freezing, unheated college apartment, terrified of failing my exams while they gleefully paid for Victoria's luxury vacations. I remember the constant, suffocating weight of being the family disappointment. Now, looking at the screens, I search my chest for a flicker of anger. I search for a spark of vindictive joy. I find absolutely nothing. The emotional void is profound, absolute, and deeply peaceful. They are simply a crisis management scenario that I have already successfully neutralized. I lean forward and press the microphone button one final time. My voice remains terrifyingly calm, stripping away the last shreds of their manipulative leverage. You told me to learn independence, Dad. I'm just honoring your parenting. Have a safe drive back. I release the button and cut the intercom. A sharp electronic click signals the total termination of the connection. The exterior speakers go dead. The heavy steel gates remain completely locked, an immovable monument to my absolute boundaries. Within seconds of the communication blackout, a new sound pierces the quiet coastal air. It starts as a distant wail, rapidly growing louder and more urgent. The automated security matrix protecting my estate does not just deny access, it actively neutralizes threats. The system registered their aggressive physical contact against the gate and immediately flagged them as hostile trespassers. The flashing red and blue lights of local Malibu police cruisers reflect sharply off the winding curves of the Pacific Coast Highway. The sirens scream toward my property line. William freezes. The rage drains from his face, instantly replaced by sheer primal panic. He knows his federal banking loans are currently under intense investigation. He knows Marcus has already been indicted. The absolute last thing he can afford right now is to be detained and questioned by law enforcement while trespassing on the estate of a high-profile corporate CEO. They have to go. Now. William drops his hands from the steel bars. He spins around and sprints toward the rusted sedan. Catherine lets out a terrified shriek, abandoning her position at the intercom and practically diving into the passenger seat. William throws himself behind the wheel, his shaking hands fumbling violently with the ignition. The engine whines and sputters in protest before finally catching. He slams the transmission into reverse, the balding tires screeching against the pristine asphalt of my driveway. Victoria screams from the back seat as the car swerves dangerously close to a stone retaining wall. William violently jerks the steering wheel, points the hood of the battered vehicle back toward the highway, and stomps on the accelerator. They flee the scene like common criminals, leaving behind nothing but a cloud of cheap exhaust and the absolute certainty that they can never ever return. While the Addams family begins their pathetic cross-country crawl back into obscurity, the man responsible for their final push over the edge is standing in a federal courtroom in downtown Los Angeles. Marcus is no longer wearing his custom-tailored Italian suits. He is dressed in a standard-issue bright orange canvas jumpsuit. The heavy iron chains around his wrists and ankles clink loudly against the polished wood of the defendant's podium. He flashes his signature charismatic smile at the federal judge, still desperately believing he can charm his way out of a concrete cell. The judge does not even look up from her reading glasses. She is entirely focused on the massive mountain of digital and physical evidence piled high on her mahogany desk. Every single document, every frozen bank routing number, every forged wire transfer receipt bears the bold black watermark of the Aegis crisis firm. I did not just hand the prosecution a case, I handed them a fully assembled, inescapable trap. The lead prosecutor reads the charges into the official court record. wire fraud, interstate identity theft, aggravated bigamy, money laundering. The list goes on for 10 agonizing minutes. Marcus's overworked public defender stands up and weakly requests bail, citing his client's lack of violent criminal history. The judge drops a heavily redacted Aegis dossier onto the podium with a loud, definitive thud. She denies bail immediately. She cites the irrefutable evidence of his offshore flight risks, his multiple assumed identities, and his calculated destruction of numerous civilian lives. She strikes her gavel. Marcus is placed on a judicial fast track for a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. The Golden Boy of Newport society is officially a federal inmate. 48 hours after Marcus's legal execution, the intercom at my Malibu estate chimes again. This time, I do not activate the automated security denial protocol. The heavy steel gates glide open smoothly, welcoming an expected guest. A sleek black town car pulls up the sweeping driveway. Dominique steps out into the brilliant California sunshine. She is wearing a flawlessly tailored blood-red blazer, her posture radiating the lethal grace of a woman who has entirely reclaimed her power. She bypasses the formal entryway and walks directly out to the back patio, where I am waiting. The crashing Pacific waves provide a steady rhythmic soundtrack to her arrival. I pour 2 glasses of vintage champagne. We sit across from each other at the glass table. We are 2 women who were specifically chosen because we looked like easy targets. Marcus and men like him rely entirely on the silence and shame of the women they exploit. They bank on the fact that their victims will be too embarrassed to fight back. We take a sip of champagne, silently acknowledging the absolute destruction we just orchestrated. The conversation shifts from our shared victory to our shared history. Dominique leans forward, tracing the rim of her crystal glass. She details the exact moment in Dallas when she found the offshore routing numbers hidden in Marcus's golf bag. She explains the cold, terrifying realization that her entire marriage was a corporate acquisition. I tell her about the fake venture capital prospectus Marcus tried to shove down William's throat, and how easily my family traded my dignity for a phantom payday. We compare his methods. We dissect his playbook. The patterns are identical. Financial predators use the exact same psychological warfare every single time. They target the isolated. They exploit the ambitious. They drain the assets and vanish into the night. Dominique sets her glass down. Her eyes lock onto mine, burning with a new sharp intensity. She does not just want to celebrate Marcus's downfall. She wants to systematize our vengeance. She proposes an alliance. Right there, with the ocean breeze blowing across the patio, we map out the architecture of a new division within my company, the Aegis Foundation. It will be a fully funded pro bono legal and financial recovery task force. Our mission objective is strictly isolated to tracking down predatory con artists, freezing their illicit assets, and legally returning stolen wealth to the women they chronically underestimate. We will utilize my corporate surveillance network and Dominique's ruthless financial auditing skills. We will become the absolute worst nightmare for every smooth-talking fraudster operating within the United States. We raise our glasses one more time. The alliance of scorned women is officially cemented in crystal and champagne. Thousands of miles away, inside the sterile, freezing confines of a federal holding center, Marcus sits shivering on a thin, plastic-covered mattress. The fluorescent lights buzz aggressively overhead. The smell of industrial bleach and absolute despair hangs thick in the recycled air. The illusion of his superiority is entirely gone. He is terrified, cornered, and completely stripped of his power. Heavy boots echo down the concrete corridor. A uniformed corrections officer stops outside the thick iron bars of Marcus's cell. The guard slides a small yellow padded envelope through the narrow metal meal slot. It is marked as cleared legal mail. Marcus scrambles off the cot, his hands shaking wildly. His mind races with desperate, frantic delusions. He believes it is a secret cashier's check. He hopes it is a contact number for a high-powered defense attorney. He prays it is a hidden lifeline that somehow survived the ruthless Aegis financial purge. He rips the reinforced paper open and dumps the contents directly onto his lap. It is not a bank draft. It is not a legal brief. It is a watch. Marcus stares down at the cheap, stuttering, super-fake Rolex watch he tried to pass off as a priceless family heirloom on the very first day we met. The gold plating is already chipping away. The second hand ticks with a loud, hollow mechanical click. Pinned to the scratched glass face of the watch is a crisp white card of heavy stock parchment. He recognizes my sharp, precise handwriting instantly. He reads the note. Your time is up. The absolute destruction of Marcus's criminal enterprise triggers the immediate cascading financial collapse of the Adams family. The phantom leverage loan they so desperately banked on vanishes into the federal evidence locker, leaving them holding the bag for their own staggering liabilities. The illusion of their aristocratic wealth completely shatters. The creditors swarm like locusts. The bank forecloses on their heavily mortgaged properties. The luxury vehicles are quietly repossessed in the middle of the night. But the most crippling blow comes from the elite catering company they hired for Victoria's lavish six-figure engagement gala. The vendors demand immediate payment for the caviar, the vintage champagne, and the custom floral arrangements that celebrated a billionaire who never actually existed. Forced into rapid bankruptcy, William and Catherine are completely stripped of their assets. They are evicted from their social circles, blacklisted from their country clubs, and forced into the brutal reality of the working class they used to actively despise. William, the former patriarch who used to dictate my worth from behind a mahogany desk, now wears a stiff, brightly colored polyester vest. He works the customer service desk at a massive, unforgiving big-box retail store. His days are spent standing on a hard linoleum floor, enduring the screaming complaints of angry shoppers trying to return defective blenders. His feet swell, his back aches. He is forced to smile and apologize to people he considers vastly beneath him. Catherine works 3 aisles over in the discount apparel section. The woman who used to host charity galas and sneer at my wardrobe now spends 8 hours a day mindlessly folding piles of cheap, discarded t-shirts. Her expensive highlights have entirely faded, leaving harsh strips of gray framing her exhausted, deeply lined face. During their mandatory 30-minute lunch breaks, they retreat to a windowless, neon-lit break room, smelling faintly of stale coffee and microwave soup. They sit across a sticky plastic table and viciously tear each other apart. William blames Catherine for indulging Victoria's delusions. Catherine shrieks at William for failing to verify Marcus's banking credentials. They fight constantly, their bitter, venomous arguments echoing off the vending machines. They turn their toxic rage entirely upon each other because they no longer have me to absorb their abuse. But the most spectacular poetic downfall belongs exclusively to the golden child. Victoria is entirely unemployable in the corporate sector. She possesses no actual skills, no work ethic, and a fraudulent resume that has been thoroughly flagged by aegis background checks. Stripped of her counterfeit moissanite ring and her billionaire fantasy, she is forced to take the only job that will hire her without references. Every night at 11, Victoria clocks in at a massive commercial real estate firm in downtown Los Angeles. She trades her designer silk dresses for a heavy dark blue industrial jumpsuit. She wears thick, slip-resistant rubber boots. She grips the handles of a massive yellow plastic cart equipped with a heavy-duty mop, a wringer, and a dozen bottles of toxic industrial solvents. She is a nighttime janitor. She pushes the squeaking cart through the silent, darkened corridors of the financial district. She empties hundreds of trash cans filled with discarded lunch containers and crumpled spreadsheets. She scrubs the grout in the executive restrooms. She gets down on her hands and knees to scrape dried gum off the lobby floor. The potent, suffocating smell of industrial bleach permeates her skin permanently, replacing the scent of her custom French perfumes. Her hands, once perfectly manicured and soft, are now covered in harsh chemical burns and painful blisters. It is the exact, humiliating reality Marcus violently promised me at the upscale steakhouse. He looked me directly in the eye and swore I would be sweeping floors for the rest of my life. Instead, his fraudulent fiance is the one pushing the broom, weeping silently into dirty mop water as she cleans the offices of women who actually worked for their success. Catherine, completely broken by the retail shifts and the squalor of their cramped rental apartment, realizes her aggressive gate-crashing tactics will never work. She retreats to her tiny formica kitchen table and attempts one last desperate psychological manipulation. She pulls out a single sheet of heavy cream-colored stationery she managed to save from her previous life. She uncaps a fountain pen and begins to weaponize the oldest trick in the narcissistic playbook. She drafts a letter heavily implying that she is dying. She writes with sweeping, dramatic cursive loops. She details mysterious chest pains, dizzy spells, and vague appointments with specialists running complex medical tests. She layers the guilt thick and heavy, claiming her heart is simply giving out from the stress of a fractured family. She writes that she might not be around much longer, begging for a final reconciliation before it is too late. She does not ask for money directly. She simply asks for me to open the door, knowing that physical access is the first required step to regaining financial control. She seals the envelope, presses a stamp to the corner, and mails it directly to the corporate headquarters of the Aegis Foundation. High above the Los Angeles skyline, I sit behind the sleek, polished glass desk of my executive suite. The Aegis Foundation is operating at full capacity. Dominique and I have already successfully frozen 3 offshore accounts linked to a new predatory syndicate operating out of Miami. The firm is a highly calibrated machine of financial justice. My assistant walks into the office carrying the daily stack of vetted mail. She places a small pile of physical correspondence on the corner of my desk. I reach over and sift through the envelopes. My fingers pause on a thick, cream-colored rectangle. There is no return address, but I do not need one. The dramatic, sweeping cursive handwriting is instantly recognizable. It is the exact same handwriting that signed the birthday cards celebrating Victoria while ignoring my existence. It is the handwriting that signed the checks funding my sister's vanity while I starved. I hold Catherine's final desperate manipulation in my hand. I can almost smell the desperation radiating from the sealed paper. I know exactly what is inside. I know the medical lies, the guilt trips, the frantic demands for unearned sympathy. I do not feel a single ounce of curiosity. I do not feel a trace of daughterly obligation. Without a second thought, without even breaking the wax seal, I turn my chair to the left. I hold the pristine envelope over the humming silver slot of my cross-cut industrial shredder. I drop it in. The steel blades catch the thick paper, instantly grinding Catherine's toxic lies into thousands of meaningless, illegible shreds. The mechanical growl of the shredder hums for a few seconds before automatically powering down, plunging the executive suite back into absolute silence. The remnants of Catherine's desperate manipulative letter sit in the clear plastic bin, a tangled nest of white confetti. I do not feel a single twinge of guilt. I do not feel a sudden crushing wave of daughterly obligation. The cultural lie that blood dictates loyalty has finally permanently lost its grip on my psyche. I stand up from the leather chair, bypass the glowing security monitors, and take the private elevator down to the ground level. I step out the back doors, kick off my heels, and walk barefoot down the winding wooden staircase that leads directly to my private stretch of Malibu beach. The wet sand is cold and grounding against the soles of my feet. The Pacific Ocean stretches out infinitely, a massive churning expanse of dark water under the twilight sky. For years, I foolishly waited for a cinematic climax to my family trauma. I waited for the grand, tearful apology where William and Catherine would fall to their knees, magically cured of their narcissism, begging for my forgiveness. I expected Victoria to suddenly develop a conscience and admit her lifelong campaign of sabotage. The reality is far less theatrical and infinitely more liberating. They will never change. They are fundamentally incapable of introspection or genuine remorse. The ultimate victory against a toxic family is not a dramatic showdown. The ultimate victory is absolute unyielding indifference. I walk along the shoreline, letting the freezing surf wash over my ankles. I remember the endless, exhausting cycle of trying to earn my place at their dinner table. I remember handing William my flawless college transcripts, only for him to toss them aside to praise Victoria for securing a reservation at an exclusive nightclub. I remember Catherine casually ignoring my severe pneumonia to throw a lavish yacht party, annoyed that my coughing might ruin her carefully curated aesthetic. I spent 2 decades auditioning for a role that was never written for me. I realize now with crystal clarity that their rejection was never a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of their profound limitations. They are parasites who only value hosts they can drain. I am no longer a viable host. I am reinforced steel. I turn my back to the crashing waves and look up at the towering illuminated structure of my estate. True family is not an accident of genetics. True family is a conscious, deliberate choice. True family is forged in the trenches of shared struggles built on a foundation of mutual respect, unyielding loyalty, and genuine support. I jog back up the wooden steps, shaking the wet sand from my feet. As I crest the top of the dune and approach the massive stone patio, the sound of the crashing ocean is immediately replaced by the warm, vibrant sounds of actual joy. Smoke rises from a massive stainless steel grill. The patio is alive with movement, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Dominique stands near the fire pit, wearing a casual linen dress, her head thrown back in genuine, uninhibited laughter as she trades stories with the lead analysts of the Aegis team. These are the people who stood by me when the Addams family tried to bury me. These are the men and women who worked 90-hour weeks to track down Marcus's hidden offshore accounts, who built this crisis management firm brick by brick alongside me. They are brilliant, ruthless, and deeply protective of one another. I grab a bottle of sparkling water from an iced cooler and join the circle. Dominique spots me raising her glass of champagne in a silent, smiling toast. There is no jealousy here. There is no vicious underlying competition. There is only the shared triumph of people who have survived the absolute worst of human manipulation and emerged entirely victorious. We eat, we share intelligence on emerging financial predators, and we celebrate the undeniable fact that we hold the reins to our own destinies. The sharp, distinct vibration of my secure corporate phone cuts through the relaxed atmosphere of the barbecue. I pull the device from my pocket. The encrypted caller ID flashes a name I recognize immediately. It is a prominent tech billionaire, a man currently fighting a brutal, highly publicized hostile corporate takeover. I step away from the fire pit, walking to the edge of the patio where the light meets the darkness of the beach. I answer the call. The man on the other end is panicked, his voice tight with the exact same terror I used to feel when William threatened to cut me off. He describes rogue board members conspiring against him, phantom debts appearing on his corporate ledgers, and a targeted media smear campaign designed to force his immediate resignation. He is begging for Aegis to intervene. He is begging for protection. I listened to his frantic rambling for exactly 60 seconds, absorbing the data, calculating the leverage, and mapping out the absolute destruction of his enemies. I cut him off smoothly. I will handle it, I state, my voice radiating absolute terrifying confidence. I end the call before he can offer another word of gratitude. I slip the phone back into my pocket. I take one last long look out at the dark, turbulent ocean. I turn around and step through the sliding glass doors, walking directly into the brilliantly lit, impenetrable fortress I built with my own 2 hands. The heavy bulletproof glass glides shut behind me. The locks engage with a heavy metallic slam, leaving my past exactly where it belongs, locked outside forever. This story highlights that external validation from a toxic family is a moving target designed to keep you small. Valerie's ultimate victory was not convincing her family of her worth, but achieving total indifference to their opinions. When blood relatives weaponize the concept of family to exploit your success, the most empowering response is to establish unyielding boundaries. True security is built from within and sustained by the chosen community that supports your authentic self, leaving the past firmly locked outside. How have you established boundaries with toxic people in your life? Share your experiences in the comments below.